Remember how I said that another dimension is the space between dimensions? Well, dimensions in that context refer to the ones outside of another dimension. As in, when talking about realities outside of another dimension is the space between all of them. Otherwise, the connotation of it being the space between dimensions is not applicable. It's not confusing at all, but it is something that needs to be said. Even the series itself is a bit ugly in the way that it communicates this. See this post description, they refer to the range of something being everywhere. They say that it doesn't matter if it's in another dimension or in a completely different world. The latter clearly meant as in a dimension outside another dimension. That way the contrast is like saying life is everywhere, be it on land or sea. But the way that they wrote it is confusing and unintuitive, because another dimension is made up of different worlds. So I guess you could be a contrarian and interpret a completely different world to still be inside another dimension. Or I guess you could say that the dimensions inside another dimension are being implied here to not be considered completely different worlds, which is also false. The thing is, when you want to refer to another dimension, you can at least say another dimension, or the space between dimensions. But when you want to refer to realities explicitly outside of it, which was the case here, you have nothing exclusive to talk about those when in contrast to realities inside another dimension. It's not like this description is incomprehensible or anything, but it is unfriendly for those who don't already know the world building of the series. I also heavily dislike when they use the word world to refer to a dimension. World can mean planet or refer to a reality, so if they specifically meant the latter, you need to be able to prove it. If you lack concrete evidence for that, you can never definitively prove that to a reasonable audience. You may only prove that your interpretation of the word could be correct, which is limited. And even if you are 100% sure that word means reality in one such context, it just looks silly in my opinion. Imagine going around using words that can easily be misinterpreted as meaning something unintended, when you could simply bother to use more concrete words. The Kirby cosmology is great, having these factors on screen in its favor, but I wouldn't say that it's perfect. As far as its flaws go, sometimes when they want to communicate something, they're unable to tell when the way in which they do so can be interpreted in several ways, partially because of the complexity of the topics they cover, partially because they fail to put themselves in the shoes of the lore enthusiast. So they'll fail to communicate something and then, you needed to understand that to now understand something else. No shit, nobody gets this aspect of the lore right. Also, the grammar and language used to define things simply look ugly at worst. It's pretty manageable, really. By the way, remember how the interdimensional rift areas happen across many dimensions? In the original game from 2011, Kirby's Return to Dreamland, there was one piece of text that almost proved this to be the case by itself. Let me explain. As you know, across the game you go into interdimensional rift areas spread many times over the planets Popstar and Halkandra, recovering energy spheres at the end of them. Well, on your last mission on Popstar, you received this piece of information. Because of the energy spheres that have countlessly scattered across worlds, holes in another dimension have appeared everywhere. You see, the energy spheres have technology capable of crossing dimensions. They created the dimensional rifts we see across the game. If the energy spheres were countlessly scattered across many worlds in another dimension, nesting place for the Doomers, then that means another dimension has many worlds, right? Well, not exactly. I gave you one possible translation for that text, but not the only one. Basically, the Japanese language doesn't have singular or plurals. You can interpret either case based on context. Particularly, other information in a sentence can help you know if something in it is singular or plural. In this case, you could very much argue that countlessly refers to the energy spheres themselves being scattered, as in referring to the fact that there are many of them. Not necessarily that there are countless worlds in which they are located, I shit you not. This removes a lot of credibility for the statement to prove that the interdimensional rift areas happen in many dimensions, and consequently prove that another dimension is made up of many dimensions. Speaking of the latter, there are some statements referring to many dimensions while in relation to another dimension, but those are vague as fuck. Remember, another dimension is used as a road to go from reality A to reality B. The idea of anyone using this road doesn't necessarily mean that they went through many dimensions inside another dimension. It can simply mean that they went from the reality in which their travel initiated to the reality in which they are right now. and boom, that already makes it many dimensions. No one says that these dimensions have to all be inside another dimension. For all we know, when using another dimension as a road, they could have visited only a single dimension there. If the idea of another dimension being made up of many dimensions is new to you, then it's important to not face that information with a confirmation bias on how it is that it's applied across the series. To be fair, considering the many dimensions between Kirby's universe and the reality where the main Halkandra is, and the many dimensions mentioned here and here, you could argue that the space between any two dimensions in the Kirby multiverse always has many dimensions along the way. That way, the many dimensions referenced here may refer to dimensions inside another dimension, just like the interdimensional rift areas. But that would be speculation. The space between some other two realities could be sheer space in another dimension without any new universes along the way. We don't know. There is yet another statement that I believed for a hot second that could be used as further proof of the interdimensional rift areas being made up of many dimensions. Kumazaki mentions that in the original Return to Dreamland, the dimensional rift allow you to travel between various worlds. You hear this and you may intuitively interpret the interdimensional rift areas to be those various worlds, right? Meaning that another dimension has many worlds or dimensions within it, correct? Well, not really. Remember, a dimensional rift is used to go into the reality where the main Halkandra is, and that is a world, and to go there you need to go inside another dimension first, so there you have at least another world. Heck, they can even be used to go into Kirby's universe, so that's at least 3 dimensions Kumazaki refers to. If my goal is to prove these areas are distributed across many dimensions, then this statement is useless for that purpose, because someone who believes they take place in only one dimension can easily interpret Kumazaki's words in a way that fits their idea of how everything works. Of course, you know better than that now since you saw my other video. He could have meant anything in that specific sentence. Anyway, hopefully this helped you better understand some things about another dimension. If you leave a like, a comment or subscribe, you will influence the algorithm and help me grow as a channel. Check my Twitter in the description to see a list of all my future Kirby videos.